Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the latest webcast of the Esri Public Safety Webinar Series. My name is Carl Walter. I'm the Industry Manager for National and Homeland Security here at Esri. I'll be facilitating our conversation today. The purpose of these webinars and this series of webinars is to share the latest trends, technical advancements, and best practices with our users, with the user community as they relate to GIS and public safety and national security. Our presentation title today is Leveraging HIFLD Open Data for Public Safety. Joining me today will be Jeff Barani from Esri. Jeff's our technical lead on both our public safety and disaster response team. Michael Donnelly from DHS. Mike is the acting deputy director of the DHS Geospatial Management Office. He's also the executive secretary of the HIFLD subcommittee. And Julie Sokol, who is the program manager from Ardent Management Consulting and directly supports DHS and the HIFLD program. Our agenda today will start with Mike, who will walk us through the HIFLD program at DHS. We'll follow that up with Julie, who will actually log into the HIFLD portal and show us some of the different elements available to users. And then Jeff Barani will operationalize that conversation and show the connectivity between ArcGIS and the HIFLD data portal with some real examples, an emergency management example and a law enforcement example, and that will be a live technical demonstration. As time permits, we will be able to take a few questions. Users are able to submit questions to us throughout the webcast, and then we will close out. Now, before we get started, with our presenters, I want to share just a short personal experience of a story that I went through prior to coming to Esri, and it will hopefully show how HIFLD and GIS can actually solve real-world problems. So, prior to my time here at Esri, I was the Fusion Center Director in Boston, and I lived through this incident, this case that you're seeing on the screen right now. And pretty much how it unfolded was, like many things, a 911 call came in for a suspicious package under a bridge over I-93 in Boston. And I-93 is the major corridor highway that brings the city in and out of the city. So it shut down that highway at rush hour. So as photos, as you can kind of see below, as photos in the right-hand corner of the device started circulating through the media, more 911 calls came in and came pouring in. So we ended up finding 31 different devices. 19 of those were in the city, and essentially what the device was about a 7-pound metal sheet with a large battery wrapped in duct tape and red wire sticking out of it. So we weren't quite sure what it was. It took us about 6 hours to figure that it was essentially a guerrilla marketing campaign for a cartoon series. But we had a dilemma leading up to that 6 hours of what to do, and one of the simplest things to do was we had devices under bridges, and a lot of them. So one of the things we wanted to do was dispatch police vehicles to every bridge that we could locate. But to do that, we had to know where the bridges were, and we had to have access to a data source that was quick and easy and authoritative. And I can assure you that really didn't exist. And by the time we kind of got some level of information available that we could send out, the incident was pretty much over. So we realized that it was a marketing campaign and that the devices were benign. But we didn't have access to the data that we needed. So today what we hope to show you is how real-life problems can actually be solved by sharing information, how day-to-day security challenges can be better managed. So the days of sharing CDs, sending email files should be going away. And we're going to show you some great examples of a national data repository, HIFLD, that will enable quick sharing of authoritative data and that will establish shared situational awareness, and we'll also show how to bring that into your GIS applications and hopefully make everyone's security responsibility a little bit easier and a little bit better. I will turn this over now to Mike Donnelly from DHS, and he's going to go over a few slides on HIFLD.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Carl. Can you guys hear me? Carl, can you hear me?
I can hear great.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Donnelly. Like Carl mentioned, I'm the acting deputy director for the DHS Geospatial Management Office. That's my day job. My side job is the HIFLD executive secretary. HIFLD stands for Homeland Infrastructure Foundation level data. We are a subcommittee under FGDC. And so I'll be talking a little bit about the subcommittee and what we do, and then we'll get into the data repository that Carl mentioned. The good news for you guys on the webinar is I have about 100 slides. Just kidding. There's only a couple of slides. Next slide, please. So before I go any further, so what is HIFLD? So for folks that may not ever heard of us, HIFLD is a federal partnership among DHS, NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the Department of Defense, Department of Interior, and Department of Justice, and other federal departments, and some state and local governments and professional organizations. So we all get together, and the purpose of HIFLD is to get together and coordinate common foundational data requirements. So we look at things that we need in order to do our business or our mission. Things like, hey, do you need bridges? Do you need to know the location of bridges? Do you need to know the location of nuclear power plants or hospitals? So those are some common data needs that each agency has. And so we look at those and we coordinate our efforts in order to maximize the limited resources we have and then ensure that the data is available and accessible and it's accurate. So in other words, getting data is in our job jar. And this process that you see on the slide helps us define what those requirements are, prioritize those requirements, and also ensure that the data is meeting, the data that we do have is meeting the mission and the mission tempo. Next slide. So we got a lot of data in HIFLD. If you may have heard of us, the HIFLD Gold data product, that stands for Homeland Security Infrastructure Protection. HIFLD Gold, for the last 10 years or so, used to be delivered via DVDs, and the DVD was stamped for official use only. In that DVD collection, there was about 7 discs, where various infrastructure themes. So you had an agriculture theme, and then in that agriculture theme you maybe had 12 layers. So there was, I want to say, upwards of 30 themes ranging from borders to land transportation, water transportation, to government facilities. And that DVD was mailed out or updated once a year, and then it was mailed out after you go through this rigorous data usage agreement process. And that really, while it worked, it didn't meet the speed of the mission, and it certainly did not meet the frequency in which some of these data sets were being updated. And so last year, through our partnership with Esri, they helped us stand up HIFLD Open. And HIFLD Open is one half of our new delivery platform. HIFLD Open allows us to decouple unclassified data from HIFLD and publish that on the web. So right now, right this second, if you Google HIFLD Open, you can get access to over 270 unclassified HIFLD data sets, and they range from agriculture, border, telecommunications. Those are all accessible to you now either as downloadable files or web services. And that services our state and local partners, private sectors, citizens, academia. This gives us kind of a whole of the nation approach to Homeland Security and enables those folks that are closer to an incident or an emergency event access to data that was previously bundled and locked with FOUO data. Now, what happened to that FOUO data? Well, we serve it up in something called HIFLD Secure. And HIFLD Secure resides in something called the DHS Geospatial Information Infrastructure, which is actually using Esri's ArcGIS portal technology. HIFLD Secure contains the FOUO data, and the commercially licensed data that used to be part of HIFLD. So we basically took unclassified data, put it on an OpenGIS site, HIFLD Open, and then took the FOU unlicensed data and put it in HIFLD Secure. And it services two different communities that are kind of doing the same mission in terms of Homeland Security and Homeland Defense. And I'll get into how you access HIFLD Secure later and who to contact for that. Next slide, please. So we got this great data. We established a couple platforms for you to access it. And one of the things that I like to do is tie all this into an actual real-world event. So last year, Hurricane Matthew was happening, and HIFLD was working on some initial early versions of parcel data and some mobile home data. So we were working behind the scenes, making sure the data is up to date and it's accurate. When FEMA came and said, hey, I heard you guys have this data, we really need it. We need it to support Hurricane Matthew response. And in less than 24 hours, we were able to put that data into the hands of FEMA using these platforms and turn that around. And they were able to use that data not just to brief the president, as you can see in the picture, but also to service state and local first responders reacting to the hurricane. And that's a really great success story in terms of the evolution of HIFLD. So if you think about how we were doing DVD distributions, if you had a DVD in your hand from 2015 or 2014, that was the only DVD, that's the only data you were going to get from us. With HIFLD Open and HIFLD Secure, we were able to push rapidly updates to data sets that mission owners or mission responders need and get that turned around in less than 24 hours. And so that's a really great success story in terms of the power of partnerships between DHS, NGA, DOD, and other federal agencies to help meet an emerging and critical mission need. Next slide. Now, if you have questions regarding how do you access HIFLD Secure, you mentioned it on the GII, or you want to know more about HIFLD Open, here's our website. If you go to that website, you'll be able to access our data list, as well as some instructions on how to get a Homeland Security Information Network account, a HISN account, which is required to access HIFLD Secure, which, because HIFLD Secure has FOU unlicensed data, we go through a separate vetting process to ensure the right people access that data. If you have questions, contact us, hifld@hq.dhs.gov. We really need community engagement. This data product that we have and these two platforms are only going to get better, but they're only going to get better with your input. And so please, if you have questions or you just want to tell us, hey, this works or this doesn't, let us know. We value that. We actually take that into action when we start planning for what we need to prioritize for next year's work plan. And from that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie Sokol.
Great. Hi, everyone. Since Mike just showed you our HIFLD website address, I wanted to show that to you first. This is the HIFLD online community, and please note that you do need an active HISN account in order to access this site and create a user account. If you don't have a HISN account already, you can contact the HIFLD support team, and we have some instructions here on the web page, and we can nominate you for an account and get you access. But once you have accessed the website, created a user account, and logged in, there's a lot of resources available to you up here. For example, there's the Resources tab, which has the HIFLD data list, and we update this with on a quarterly basis, so you can download this and keep it at the ready to explore all of the HIFLD data inventory on both HIFLD Open and HIFLD Secure, and even legacy HCIT 2015 data. We also post useful notifications about the data on this tab here as well. But most people join this website to access HIFLD data, and so these buttons up here are the quickest way to do that. If you want to request access to HIFLD Secure and go through the process of e-signing a DUA, you would click here. If you wanted to get a DVD of legacy HIFLD 2015 data, you would click here. But if you wanted to head out to a HIFLD Open, which does not require a login or HISN account, you can click here. So I have the HIFLD Open tab available here. And now that we've arrived, we can easily, I just want to let you know too that you can find the HIFLD Open page on any search engine simply by typing in HIFLD Open. You do not need a HISN account or login to get here. And there are numerous ways to explore the 309 data sets that we have set up. So one way is to scroll through the categories, and we have 24 categories of data, or you can click on this Explore All Data button, which will list every data set for you. But I have a specific layer in mind. Today I want to search on hospitals, for example, which is also in the public health category. And when I go to the search results, any data set with hospital-related information also comes up, but my layer of choice is right on top here. So at first glance, I can go to the viewer and I can see that there are over 7,000 features in this data set. But I'm interested in just the Washington, D.C. layer. So I can go to this search box and type in my city. And I can also zoom into the map without using that search box. And I can see all the features that are in my area of interest. I can also hover over each point to get the name of that point. And I can even click within that point to get more details there as well. So another way to visualize this data involves changing the view of the attributes. So I can click here on visualization, and I can select a different attribute to view. So for example, I can click beds, and the color ramp changes to show me that the darkest points have the most hospital beds. So this is just one way to quickly interact with the data and get to know what this data set will provide. Then there are the download options. So I can either download the full data set in any of these formats, or I can get the filtered data set with just my area of interest, and that downloads here. As a side note, I can go up to My Activity, which tracks my downloads for each session. So I can get back to my downloads for easy access. I'd also like to point out the API selection here, where I can find links to web-enabled data that I can incorporate into any online program. We have GeoJSON for both the full data set and the filtered data set. And also you can see that there are links to the metadata information and any relevant licensing information. Everything on HIFLD Open is obviously publicly available, but you get the actual verbiage here from our data usage agreement. I'd also like to point out other ways to explore this data directly on HIFLD Open. For example, you can see the list of attributes in this table, and you can sort them with these different columns. Also, you can go to charts and find different ways to visualize those data, and there's a lot of different ways you can explore depending on the data set. So back to the home page, there are a lot of different ways to explore each data set and interact with the data sets on HIFLD Open, but there are even more ways to apply this data to user applications. So I would like to turn this over to Jeff, who is ready with a demonstration of his application. Jeff?
Great, thanks Julie. Now I'd like to take a few minutes and show you how to leverage this data and show you some examples of putting this in action. So the first example that I'd like to show here is where I've got some of the HIFLD Open data configured within inside the ArcGIS Web Application Builder. And I have this specifically configured within inside the Situational Awareness widget. And why that's important is, from an emergency management context, that one of the second questions that directors or executives, often ask after something's happened is what's impacted. And all of the data that's available with HIFLD Open really helps us answer those questions, quickly and efficiently with national data sets. So what we're looking at here is a variety of, live feeds throughout the U.S. We can see that the snowstorm still impacting the Northeast here from some of the weather warnings and watches. We see stream gauges and wildfires and the like. But in this case, I want to zoom in here to Boise, Idaho. They've had heavy snow this winter. Going to potentially create a flooding problem, and we can see here that we've got a flood warning here in this area for the rivers outside of Boise. So this is kind of our area of concern here for our example. And you'll note here that if I click on the ellipse button down here at the bottom, I can say set location. And what that's doing now is setting the location now for our situational awareness widget to basically start to analyze all of the impact in this potential area. So what I've done is I've configured this viewer to point directly to some of the services, some of the data that's directly available from HIFLD Open, and I'm able to see really quickly the potential impact of the flooding in this area and let me know what I need to be potentially concerned with. Here I can see the schools in the area in terms of and also the total number of students. These are just attributes directly coming from the HIFLD Open layer. I can see the churches or the places of worship. I can see all of the fire stations that are in this area. Fire stations for the U.S. was a recent addition to the HIFLD Open collection of data. I can see the number of mobile home parks that are in this area, and that was one of the layers that was that Mike had kind of featured. And now I can get a sense of the size, leveraging some of the attribute information that's inside here. They're large, medium, small. So again, you can see I've just kind of configured this with a variety of different data inside here directly coming from HIFLD Open that immediately gives me some details about the potential impact in the area of the flooding. So in my mind, this is really powerful. This is a really kind of powerful way to leverage this great resource of information and make it operational for folks inside your organization to be able to get at very quick picture of the potential impact in an area. So in a few minutes, I'll actually walk you through the steps of how to configure an application like this and leverage some of the existing data coming from HIFLD Open. Another, as Carl mentioned, there's another scenario that we wanted to kind of walk through this morning, and let's go back to the issue that Carl laid out earlier. So if you're charged with finding all of the bridges here in an area, and being able to look at that, maybe if you have to go out and do inspections, right? If you have to see if one of those potential explosive devices are attached to the bridges, and kind of the scenario that Carl laid out earlier, the data coming from HIFLD Open can really help us do that very quickly. So here's a slightly different view of looking at all the data here in HIFLD Open. So let's go back to my viewer here for a second. Let's clear out this particular scenario. Let me go back over to Boston. Let me just give you a sense of how this can be used in a slightly different use case. So I'm going to turn off my weather warnings and watches layer here, and I'm going to turn on the PSAP boundary. So again, this is another addition or another element or service that's available from the HIFLD Open data. So in this case, I want to look at the number of bridges by the different by the PSAP boundary. So I'll select, let's see, I'll select the Boston Police Department here, PSAP boundary, and I want to find out how many bridges are in this area. So again, leveraging the situational awareness widget, I'll say set location, and immediately it's summarizing all of the critical infrastructure that's in this area, including the number of bridges. So now I'm able to see that there's 329 bridges in the Boston Police Department. So if we had that potential scenario, as Carl laid out earlier, and we had to have officers go out and take a look at each of the bridges, now this is, we've got this information here at our fingertips and are able to more efficiently and quickly get officers out to go take a look at all of the bridges here in this area. So in this case, I'm just looking at a summary of the bridges that are in this area. What I've configured in this additional view, in this case, this is the operations dashboard. I went through a couple of additional steps. I downloaded the data for just the area that I was interested in, and I added in a couple of additional fields. I enriched this with the data from the PSAP boundary, in this case, Cambridge Communications, and then I also added in an additional field for status. So in this case, open or close. If the bridge were closed, for example, due to the potential threat here in this case. So this is just really kind of a summary view of that information and presenting back, the results of the actions that may need to be taken, in the scenario that Carl, laid out here. And really what this means is folks in some sort of editing application here, as they go through, maybe the event is over, they can communicate now that the bridge is, open. So I'm just simply going to flip the status here to open, and for the couple of bridges that are in this area, perhaps as the situation is resolved, it's understood that it's a media event and not a potential, kind of threat. Leveraging now the data that's configured here in this application, I'm able to convey and display that information, really quickly. And now you're seeing, those updates now show back up in perhaps a view that could be displayed at the front of the command center with the recent inspections, right, where we change this from closed to open. We can see here kind of that summary kind of information. So again, just really kind of a way to, kind of give you some examples from a use case perspective on how to leverage, this information, really quickly within inside your organization, but in this case, a law enforcement scenario. And being able to, as Carl can probably appreciate and validate, having access to this information through HIFLD Open can help us be very agile to changing, threats or changing conditions, whatever the disaster may be, and being able to leverage the information and coming from HIFLD Open very quickly to provide, great situation awareness, operational intelligence to help, public safety agencies, execute their mission. So those were kind of two scenarios here that we wanted to kind of highlight in the course of the demonstration. But what I want to switch gears to now is actually show you how to start to build, these types of applications, how to start to leverage this inside your own, organization, perhaps for your own, purposes. So here with inside ArcGIS Online, I've simply have a new map. I've logged in with my, credentials here, and maybe I want to start to build out, the first scenario that I showed earlier. So I want to start here and start to add in some of the living atlas layers. This will just help us kind of give context from a situation awareness perspective. So I'll just pull in some of the layers that may be important to me here. Earthquakes, short-term warnings, weather warnings and watches, stream gauges. Let's see. That should be good enough to at least get us started, and I can continue on kind of browsing out through the additional kind of living atlas category. So again, here I've got some live feeds of information here showing up on my map. And now I want to start to add in and kind of add context to this with some of the data coming from HIFLD Open. So I want to show you a couple of different ways of how you can add in and start to bring in some of this information. So first of all of the information is registered in ArcGIS Online directly. So I simply can come in here and say search for layers, and I can search with inside ArcGIS Online and look for the data that's on HIFLD Open. So I want to say mobile homes, HIFLD. And there we go. I found that data. I can see it's coming from the HIFLD Open team. If I want, I can, if I really want to make sure, I can dig in and look at some of the item details page here. And again, see that this is a feature layer coming from the HIFLD Open team and making this, data available. So that's one layer now that I want to add to my map. And so there we go. It comes in with some default symbology, but I can come in here and and change the way this looks. I can go ahead and pick a symbol here. So in this case, I've already added in a couple of symbols, in this case some images, and I've got a combination of some of the symbols coming from the NABSIG symbol library, as well as some of the symbols coming from Esri. So there I've picked my mobile home symbol here. That's a great way to have that added to the map. Another kind of knob and dial to turn here that I've configured is configuring the pop-up. What are some of the elements that I want to display here on the map, and I only want to kind of pick a couple of key things here, and I can spend more time getting this to display kind of properly. But setting the pop-up is important to convey the right amount of details to your users, and whatever elements I want to make sure I've got here. So we'll keep units, and so size is actually a key element. Let's make sure I've got that in here. Yeah, make sure the size is selected and hit OK. And now here we can see that the different sizes of mobile home parks. That's what I showed earlier, and I'll show you in just a minute how to configure that within inside of the widget. So okay, so that's one example. So as Julie mentioned, the HIFLD open site doesn't require any credentials. So here I've logged in. Obviously, if you need access to the HIFLD Secure, you need your HISM login to be able to get to some of the other data sets and resources. But again, this is all open content, so I can come in here and start to browse some of the content that's available. So for example, if I want to come in here and look at emergency services, I can see the list of elements. This is just another way of getting at the same information. So for example, if I'm interested in fire stations, this may be another layer that I want to add into my map. So in this case, I'm just going to copy the URL to the map service. This is just simply another way to add in the data. So I'll say add layer from web. Paste in the URL to the fire stations layer here. And now I've got this showing up inside my map as well. The same type of thing. I'm going to change the symbology here really quick. Obviously you can spend more time customizing or configuring the symbols and the layers to show up on the map how we'd like. I'll go ahead and hit done. Now, obviously there's a tremendous amount of data here. I think 50,000 plus fire stations within inside the United States. I'm going to configure my visibility range here to only show at I'll have this show at a kind of city scale. So now you notice here that it's grayed out, and it will only draw when I zoom in here to a little bit more kind of level of detail. So there we go. I'm going to do the same thing for mobile home parks. There we go. And as a good GIS person, if you haven't noticed yet, I haven't saved my map. So that's something I should do here from a best practices perspective. So I'll go ahead and save my create a title for it, tag, and I'll save that in my HIFLD directory. So this is the type of workflow and the type of steps that I went through in preparing my data, preparing my map for that situation awareness application I showed there at the beginning. So that should be good enough to now. So hopefully that kind of gives you a sense of some of the different ways that you can bring in data, either by adding the data directly from the web, or searching with inside ArcLine to bring in those HIFLD open layers. So next, what I want to show is I want to go through the steps of how we can configure this with inside the Situation Awareness Viewer. So now I'm going to come in here, or excuse me, inside the web app builder, and I'm going to create a web app, and I'm going to say this is my viewer. So I've got my web map all set. I've got some of the HIFLD open data layers here included within inside our particular map, and I'm going to go ahead and create my application here. So now it's going to take me into the web app builder environment. and a couple different themes or types to choose from. I'm going to choose the Launchpad theme, and now the next step here, obviously I'm using this particular web map. I'm going to come into the widgets, and I want to add in a new widget here to the bottom. And the key widget that I want to add is the situational awareness widget. So I'm going to go ahead and select this widget, and now it's taking me to the configuration screen for this particular widget. And basically this is the main kind of entry point where we can configure what we want to show up in the summary elements that are down there at the bottom of the situation awareness viewer. So I'm going to add a layer here, add in a tab. In this case I'm going to browse down to my fire stations. So in this case I want to get a summary of all the fire stations that were in the impacted area. So I'm going to simply just have this. If I had good data here on that I would want to summarize, I can add in information there. But in this case, I'm just simply going to show the count. And so that will give me the count of fire stations. Next, I'm going to configure the mobile home parks layer inside here. And in this case, I'm going to just use a slightly different way of displaying the summary information. I'm going to use a technique called group counts. So what this is doing here now is when I come into the configuration tab, I want to pick the size. And what that's going to show is it's going to show a feature count of the different sizes of mobile homes in the affected area. I'm going to hit OK. And so there we go. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So let's go back out to the Senate where we were looking at earlier in Boise. So now when I go back to my area of concern here, I'm going to say, I'm going to set this as the location, and now we can see, really quickly, I've got the count of fire stations here that I configured within the view, as well as the total count of mobile homes that were in the area, in addition to the size. So it's just a couple of different ways of displaying, the information. So in this case, in just a few minutes, I was able to add in some weather data, bringing that, directly in from ArcGIS Online, and then, here, been able to configure this inside of the situation awareness viewer to be able to see, the potential impact. So in this case, I simply just picked a couple of different layers, and for the purposes of illustration, I went through and added in the pop-up information, and then configured them with inside the situation awareness viewer. So just to kind of give you a sense of now how you're able to leverage this information really quickly with inside your organization, how you're able to leverage this and be ready to go with this information. So this is the example that we configured really quickly. Here, if I were to come in to the example I showed you, I had simply built this up with many different layers that were added inside here in my web map. We want to go to the widgets here. You can see this is how I configured the original application. I just simply added in the layers and picked different values for the layers inside here. So for example, if I went into public schools, you can see in this case I had a couple of different elements that we configured to not only show the total count of public schools in the impacted area, but also to summarize on the total population of the students and teachers, total enrollment, and the full-time teachers, for example, for that particular element. And this is how we're able to display that information really quickly on the map. Let's see. Okay, so that was a quick view of some of the ways of configuring this information with inside the situation awareness viewer. I see some kind of questions coming in from you all, and I guess before we kind of go back to Carl and Mike and Julie for some kind of additional, questions, I wanted to highlight and I wanted to kind of hit some of the questions that are kind of coming in here. So there's actually two ways of kind of bringing in the data. We can leverage this by hitting the map service, directly. So this would always allow us to have the most up-to-date data that's directly coming from HIFLD Open, and we're just relying on the map services that are provided to bring that in. So as data updates get made to HIFLD Open, we would always have this data available to us to suit our needs. Another option, especially if you want to add in additional fields, customize configure the way that this information is displayed, we can additionally download the data. And as Julie mentioned, we can download the data by a filtered area. So we can only get the shapefile, for example, or file geodatabase for the area that we're interested in. And this would allow us to bring it down, bring this into our own ArcGIS server environment, or publish as a hosted feature service with inside ArcGIS Online, add in some additional fields, and you'd be off and running that way with being able to configure this with inside your application. And be able to leverage this information that way. But again, it would be disconnected from the HIFLD Open Map service, so as that data gets updated, you wouldn't see the most recent updates. Another kind of technical question that I wanted to highlight here is that from a credits perspective, credits, in this case, in this particular application, we would only be using credits if we were to stand up a hosted feature service of the data. And in this case, in this first example, we didn't do any of that. We were just simply hitting the map services directly coming from HIFLD Open and combining that with some of the live feeds data that's coming with ArcGIS Online. So no credits were harmed in the first configuration example that we showed here, because we're simply viewing data that's coming from a variety of services. If we were in this second example, credits would be consumed for or only used in the storage of the feature service data that I stood up, and it's pretty minimal, and you can go to the credit calculator to see that. So I think there's basically from the credit perspective, it's pretty economical, and not many credits are used in either case. I just wanted to kind of highlight there as that kind of question comes in. So Carl, I mean that's kind of is what I wanted to show today, both from a demonstration perspective to show some examples of how to use it, as well as how to get started quickly in configuring this inside the situational awareness viewer to give everyone a sense of how to leverage this information. So Carl, maybe I can turn it back over to you if there's additional questions on this information.
Yep, that's great, Jeff, and a great review, Jeff and Julie and Mike. So a couple comments. So my scenario in Boston a decade ago, it took me 6 hours to even get some amount of data from the region of where all these bridge locations were, and I would never even qualify it as close to authoritative or complete. And some of it was facts, some of it was spreadsheets, some of it was shapefiles. What Jeff just showed you in about 5 minutes, he literally solved that problem through no development, through all configuration in a matter of minutes. And not only did he have the locations of the infrastructure that was in play, bridges, we were actually able to manage or show a way to manage, if bridges were searched and a device was found, and have that internally as well as share that externally to any of the vetted partners, and that can be done in a matter of minutes. More important, so that was a once in a year, once in a 5-year scenario. There are ways every day that this data can be leveraged in very similar manners, which is really the challenge and the call to action. The other thing is when I was running the Fusion Center in Boston, I would tell my guys, I said, listen, we collect a lot of information, and we did as a Fusion Center. I said, but what we collect during our normal course of business is really 10% of the solution. Everybody else, all the other data out there is what was really, to me, the holy grail, and we didn't have access to it. So, I mean, my my thoughts were we need to collect the other 90%, and to do that it was phone calls, it was trips, it was file sharing, it was emails, and there was no way to manage it and no way to track it, and certainly no way to keep it up to date. And today with the repository, a national repository like HIFLD, that's really done for you, and it's done at no expense, which is really an incredible thing. And then I think Jeff showed really how to operationalize that repository, that portal, into your own GIS applications for day-to-day as well as for catastrophic scenarios. We have a couple minutes left, and I'm going to go into some of the questions. We're probably going to only be able to do 2 or 3, but I will start off with one probably for Mike Donnelly. Mike, how often is HIFLD Open and HIFLD Secure? How often are those layers updated?
Thanks, Carl. So that's a tricky question. We aim for a quarterly update. Not every data set gets updated quarterly, and those data sets that do get updated quarterly, once we post them on HIFLD Open or HIFLD Secure, we try to work with the data owners to understand what their frequency and tempo are. And one of the things that we try on at least on Open and soon on Secure is we try to point wherever possible to wherever that authoritative data provider is hosting their data. We're trying to get away from doing snapshots of data. So if for example the Army Corps of Engineers or FEMA are maintaining their own open ArcGIS sites, we try to point to those repositories on HIFLD Open instead of taking a snapshot of their data and then rehosting it. This allows kind of a no wrong door approach to discovering data and using data.
Great. Now, I've got another question. I think probably this is for you too, Mike. And now that I just made fun of passing CDs and DVDs, I hope you have the right answer here. So are you still going to be providing DVDs to the user community?
So that's a yes and no question. So yes, there are DVDs available of the 2015 data. So that's the last time the data was pressed all together and collated as an FOUO product. So that's the unclassified data sets plus the licensed data sets plus the FOU data sets. But that was from 2015. The newer data sets that you're seeing propagate through HIFLD Open and Secure, those are going to be the 2 platforms that you'll be able to access the data. But we do make the data available for download, so if you really need to put that on a DVD, you can after you download it.
Great, thank you. And I think this one might be for Julie. And it may have actually come up partially answered, but Julie, maybe if you want to just address it again. How do we go about changing information or adding information to HIFLD if we need new information or if we find information where there might be an error?
Sure, we are open to all feedback all the time. And the best way to do that is to contact the HIFLD inbox, which is HIFLD@hq.dhs.gov. And that's just our one-stop shop for any question, any feedback, getting users a HISN account, anything you might have. Our data providers use that email address to contact us directly. So please use that email address and we can help out and capture any feedback from the community.
All right, and some of that contact information should be showing on my screen right now. Our email addresses, the website to upcoming public safety webinars, and then the contact information, websites and email addresses for DHS, GII, and the HIFLD folks. And we are at our closeout time. I just wanted to thank everybody for the participation. I think we showed what I would qualify as a modern example of number one, a geospatial platform leveraging a modern example of a very robust and evolving portal data repository of unbelievable amounts of authoritative data in the HIFLD and the HIFLD program. So thank you for your participation, folks, and we do record this webinar, and we'll send out access in a subsequent email to everybody, as well as if there are additional questions we did not have time to answer, we will respond directly to the folks that asked those questions. So thanks and have a great day.